My in-laws, who always favored the golden child, showed up at my husband's funeral to demand his property, but I have a video they won't like. I'm a 44-year-old woman, and I recently lost my husband, who was 48. We shared 20 wonderful years together, 12 of them as husband and wife. 5 years ago, he was diagnosed with leukemia, and a few weeks ago, he passed away. While the loss is heartbreaking, I've come to terms with it. I know I'll miss him deeply and that my life will never be the same. He was the love of my life, and I doubt I'll ever feel that way about anyone else. But now he's in a better place, and he was really sick in the last few months of his life, so I'm relieved he's finally at peace. Anyway, last week, we finally held his funeral service. I didn't expect his parents to show up because they hadn't had the best relationship with him, and for the past 8 years, they hadn't even been on speaking terms. My husband had distanced himself from his family and vowed never to talk to them again, and rightfully so, if I'm being honest. You see, my in-laws are the kind of people who had a golden child and never bothered to hide it from my husband. My husband's older brother, Jack, 50, is a good-for-nothing alcoholic and has always been that way. Yet, for some reason, his parents always preferred him over my husband, no matter what my husband did. It's likely why my husband ended up being an overachiever. Despite that, he did everything he could to be there for his parents and brother. He was entirely family-oriented, but they never appreciated him. When we started dating, I began noticing how differently they treated him at home. I spoke to my husband about it several times, urging him to stand up for himself, but he would tell me, "This is my family, and I just want to be kind to them." So, no matter how poorly they behaved, he was too good for his own good. But after he started dating me, he began tolerating less of their nonsense. Instead of being a doormat, he occasionally stood up for himself because I kept reminding him that if they treated him so badly, they weren't the kind of family he needed in his life. By the time we had been together for 3 years, he had no tolerance for their behavior and wouldn't stand for the way they treated him. This caused tension between them because they were so used to walking all over him that they couldn't believe this new version of him. They suspected I was part of the reason for this change, as he started standing up for himself after meeting me. So, they tried to brainwash my husband into leaving me, but it didn't work, and it only made our relationship stronger. It's safe to say that my in-laws and I never got along and were always at odds, except that I was on the right side of things, and they were always awful to us. So, when they actually showed up at the funeral with Jack, I was quite shocked because the last time we had interacted, my husband and I had left after a really nasty fight, and it hadn't been pretty. After my husband and I got married, we were trying to distance ourselves from my in-laws anyway, so it's not like we had a good relationship at that point. But we had been invited to a Christmas dinner and attended out of courtesy. However, when we got there, we realized we had made a huge mistake because all they did at that party was talk about how my husband's new business wouldn't do well and was doomed to fail. After the party, we confronted his parents about it, and they said they were just trying to help him realize it wasn't the right thing and that he should stop copying his brother. As apparently Jack had also started a similar business after my husband announced his. To clarify, we were in the plastics and recycling business. We had thoroughly researched the market and knew what we were doing, unlike Jack. So that ended in a big fight, and we left after deciding we would never speak to them again. Obviously, Jack's business didn't take off because he didn't have the skills my husband had, nor did he work hard on his own, expecting to capitalize on my husband's efforts. Anyway, 8 years had passed since then, and they never bothered to reach out again, not even when my husband was diagnosed. I'm pretty sure they knew. They didn't talk to us, and when he was in the hospital, they never visited. Their appearance at the funeral was a surprise. I ignored them throughout the service, and they only approached me after it was over. They tried to speak kindly to me, but I wasn't having it. I kept a stern face and told them they were welcome to offer their condolences, but after that, they needed to leave because I wasn't interested in interacting with them. I didn't want to interact with them when my husband was alive, so now that he was gone, I had even less incentive to talk to them, and I made that very clear. Then they dropped the act, and his parents told me they needed to speak to me privately. I told them they'd have to wait until everyone left, because otherwise I wouldn't have enough time to talk with them. I was very curious about what they wanted to discuss. After everyone left, I spoke to them outside the venue. Jack didn't wait and left with everyone else, so it was just my in-laws and me for the conversation. They told me they had considered visiting my husband in the hospital, but ultimately decided against it because he was already very ill, and they didn't want to bother him further. It was a really poor and absurd excuse for not visiting their son when he was literally on his deathbed, but I wasn't expecting anything better from them either. I just told them I didn't need any justification for what they had done, and that they needed to get to the point because I'd had a long day and didn't want to waste any more time on them. They seemed pretty upset when I spoke to them in that tone, but it's what they deserved. They told me they were there because they wanted to say goodbye to their son one last time, and also wanted to talk to me about some unfinished business. Now everyone knew I would be taking over the business after him. It may have been his idea, but I had been with him every step of the way during its execution and everything else, so naturally, it would be mine. We also had the paperwork in order. So as soon as they mentioned it, I made it clear they didn't stand a chance. My husband's terms had been very clear from the beginning. He made sure to have all these legal formalities in place as soon as he was diagnosed. I knew they were probably here to talk about involving Jack in the business, but that was never going to happen. Then, after a brief pause, they told me that since they couldn't have the business, they at least wanted me to give them the property. By property, they meant the house we had put so much effort into designing, and they wanted it for themselves because they believed their family needed it more. Since we didn't have children, they claimed I didn't need such a big house just for myself because it was quite a spacious place. They said they were tired of living in their own home and needed a change of scenery, so they planned to live in our property and rent out their own house as an additional source of income. I was stunned that they would suggest this because, after not speaking to someone for 8 years, you don't show up at their funeral and ask their widow to give you the house. I lost my patience. I was already miserable enough, so I yelled at them to leave because I literally couldn't stand to see them. I was already furious with them, and I guess they were pretty mad at me too, since I had already told them off twice before. So when I started yelling at them, they yelled back and said they were only trying to find peace, but I was being a complete jerk, and they didn't appreciate it. Then they played the age card, saying I didn't know how to respect my elders. I immediately shot back, saying they didn't even know how to respect the dead, as my husband had just been buried, and they were already circling like vultures. They made things worse by saying that, since I had refused their polite request, they would make sure to sue me and take the property for themselves. To be clear, my husband had clearly left everything to me in his will, so I don't even know why they thought threatening me with a lawsuit was a good idea, as I think my husband was very explicit. I told them they would never win, even if they decided to sue me. They said it was my fault their son hadn't spoken to them in the past 8 years and hadn't been able to reconcile with them, which didn't even make sense. They thought I had brainwashed him into turning against them, so they were going to make sure I didn't get anything from him. I simply told them to leave, and when they finally did, I drove back home too. I was really angry at that moment and wasn't thinking clearly. So I had completely forgotten about a video my husband had asked me to play for his parents if they bothered to show up at his funeral. It had completely slipped my mind, and I only remembered it after I got home. Later, I'll talk about the video's content. I had actually helped him set up and record the video about a month before he passed, so I knew exactly what he had said in it and knew it would be very painful for his parents. I decided to take a break for a couple of days and then go back to my in-laws to show them exactly where they stood with their son and how it was their fault, not mine, as they were trying to make it seem. A couple of days after the funeral, I decided to contact my in-laws. Since we were mutually blocked everywhere, I decided to go to their house and show them the video in person. They were very surprised to see me, but I decided to be kind to them and told them that my husband had actually left them something and I wanted to show them what it was. I knew they wanted to slam the door in my face just as much as they were curious and greedy, so we sat in their living room and I showed them the video. As for the video's content, my husband probably knew his parents would come after me once he passed, so he took every necessary legal precaution. I was completely covered legally, and now, on the emotional side, he had made that video where he confronted his parents about their terrible behavior toward him in the past. He said he had always felt like less of a priority in the family, because it seemed his parents always preferred the golden child, Jack, over him, and they never bothered to hide it. He then proceeded to remind them of all the ways they had mistreated him, such as when they refused to pay for his college tuition but were spending thousands and thousands of dollars on his brother, who did nothing but party day and night. Even when he started working at his first job, they constantly compared him to Jack, who was earning a bit more than him at the time. It was really unfair because, obviously, Jack was older and had a 2-year head start over him. Even so, he never said anything against his own parents. But then the way they dismissed his business idea was unacceptable, and even though they were wrong, they never apologized for it. They didn't even talk to him when he was diagnosed, so now they had no right to harass me for what they believed they deserved because he really left them exactly what they deserved, which was nothing. In the video, he told them never to come near me again and said that, to him, they had actually been dead for a long time, so his real death shouldn't even matter to them. Just like he didn't care whether his parents or supposed family were okay or not, because in truth, the only family he ever had was me. It was pretty moving. I had tears in my eyes at the end of the video, not because of what he said about his parents, but because of what he said about me. As for my in-laws, they were completely stunned when the video ended. After it finished, I composed myself. I turned around and told them that even if they tried to sue me, I would simply show this video as evidence that my husband truly didn't want anything to do with them or leave them anything. The reason for this was that they had mistreated him his entire life, so they had no one to blame but themselves. It definitely wasn't my brainwashing or manipulation that led to this, and I hope they realize that now. But instead of accepting it, they turned it against me and said I was a horrible person for playing that video, knowing they were still dealing with the loss of their son. And now I had gone out of my way to show them this awful video. They then started accusing me of using editing software to manipulate their late son's face and voice, coming up with equally ridiculous theories to deflect their guilt. When I told them I didn't have to prove anything to them, they said I was selfish and didn't deserve anything my husband had left me. They seemed genuinely upset while accusing me of all this. Since then, I've been wondering if I did something wrong by showing them that video. Because even though they had always treated my husband poorly, they were still his parents. Maybe they really did feel bad? I don't know. I feel confused right now. Am I the bad person for playing a video my husband left for his parents? Edit. Some of you seem confused about whether I played the video willingly or not. Well, it was partly because of that, and partly because my husband literally gave me specific instructions to play that video for his parents, in case they tried to bother me after his death and claim any property like they were doing. To be honest, I didn't do it out of malice. It was my husband who asked me to, and I was simply following his instructions to make them back off. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it was both his idea and mine. Some of you have also been asking where Jack was during all of this, and honestly, I have no idea. He definitely wasn't at home when I went, so I don't know what he's doing. Anyway, I hope this clears things up. Update 1. I would like to thank all of you so much for the support you've shown me in the comment section of the original post. Dealing with the loss of a loved one is never easy, especially when it's someone like my husband. He was truly a sweet and gentle soul, and I'm going to miss him every day for the rest of my life. So it hurts when people insult him, especially knowing that I already miss him and that he's no longer in this world. I don't see the point of calling him a doormat for his parents, weak, or other names like that. He's gone. He's not even going to be able to read those comments. The person who will read them is me, and I'm already deeply hurt and miserable over losing my husband. I don't need to hear everyone's negative thoughts about him too. I know everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but speaking ill of the dead is just wrong. So I don't appreciate it, and I'd really like it if you didn't say such things about him. Apart from that, thank you so much to everyone who has been supportive. Anyway, it's been a week since I visited my in-laws, and they still haven't reached out to me. When I left their house that day, they were very angry and accused me of all sorts of crazy things, like trying to intentionally hurt them and intimidate them into backing off and not filing lawsuits against me or even contesting the will. I mean, if they want to do that, they're free to. It'll be a waste of time and money because I highly doubt they'll get anything out of it. But hey, if they want to go ahead despite the video, they can do what they want. Who am I to stop them? Since then, I've been keeping myself busy to avoid thinking about any of this. I'm just trying to focus on work now because I need to set aside my grief and also think about the more practical aspects of life. I'm fortunate to have really supportive parents who have been staying with me for the past few days. I've been really exhausted after coming home from work, so they've taken over all the household chores. My dad is still working, but he's told me he'll take care of all the things my husband used to handle, like paying bills and running errands, as I've always been a bit forgetful. And my mom will handle cooking and cleaning. We had a housekeeper, but she resigned for personal reasons, which I had been telling my parents about a few days ago. The next day, they showed up at my house with their belongings, so it was really kind of them. I'm very grateful that people are taking such good care of me. Update 2. So, my in-laws decided to contest the will. My husband's lawyer talked to me about it, and we're not very concerned about what might happen with that. We know they're going to lose. What was really surprising was that they emailed me to say that my strategy of trying to scare them with that video wasn't going to work because they were going to get what was rightfully theirs. They said my husband was their flesh and blood before he was my husband, so they felt more entitled to what he had built for himself. They also said they weren't just going after the property, but would also ensure they got some shares of the business, as they felt they deserved it. Fortunately for me, courts don't operate based on what people feel, so they can feel entitled to the whole world, but that's not going to help their case. Anyway, that email is going to be useful, so I've saved it and sent it to my lawyer. I'm still living with my parents, who have been very helpful and supportive. They even offered to talk to my in-laws to reach a peaceful resolution, because they believe my parents' authority might be taken more seriously by them, but I told them it wasn't necessary because I want them to go ahead and handle the lawsuit. I know it's going to be a massive waste of time for them, and that's exactly what I intend to do, waste their time and money. People have been visiting me quite frequently over the past few weeks to see how I'm doing and to offer their condolences, as some couldn't attend the service. I've been very busy managing work and hosting visitors, so I've barely had time to reflect on what I'm going through and process my feelings. But a few days ago, I found myself in my husband's office looking for some work-related documents, and I almost broke down because I miss him so much, and I could picture him in that place. I wish I could talk to him one more time and tell him how much I love him and how much I'm missing him right now, but I know I can't, so I just think about it and then let it go. Right now, my only goal is to ensure our business succeeds because I know he would have loved that, and he intended for us to make a lot of money and be extremely successful. His ambition has given me the motivation to work very hard, so that's exactly what I'm doing. Update 3. Hi, it's been 2 weeks since my in-laws contested the will, and so far, they haven't achieved anything. But something very interesting happened yesterday. I received a message from Jack, of all people. I was quite surprised since he and I literally have nothing to talk about, and given the situation with his parents, I thought it was pretty bold of him to contact me. We've never been particularly close, and are definitely not on texting terms. I hadn't even blocked him because I didn't have his number, but when he messaged me, he said he wanted to talk to me and asked if he could visit me at home. I found it a bit odd, and my first reaction was simply to say no and block him. But I decided to give him a chance because I had a gut feeling he had something important to tell me. Besides, if he was reaching out to me, I was pretty sure it had something to do with my in-laws. Anyway, I agreed to meet with him and told him to come over. My parents would be home, so I didn't think I had anything to worry about. When he finally arrived, he brought flowers and offered his condolences right away. He said he hadn't been able to express them at the funeral because I was busy dealing with his parents, but he really wanted me to know how sorry he was for my loss. He was surprisingly kind, and I didn't know what to say because I wasn't expecting this kind of behavior. Before, every time we interacted at his family's house, he always seemed quite loud and self-centered, but this was a very different person. Also, he didn't smell of alcohol at all, unlike how he used to years ago, and it seemed like he had gotten his life together. After a bit of small talk, he finally got to the point and told me he was there to warn me that his parents were planning to defame me, and it wasn't going to be pretty. They were planning to make up a series of lies about how my husband had allegedly borrowed money from them to start his business initially, and now I was refusing to pay them back when they needed the money. Since there was no binding contract, they couldn't legally come after me, so they planned to take it to social media. It was an incredibly stupid plan, and I don't even know why they thought this might work, but I was really grateful that Jack had warned me so I could cut this off at the root. He told me that in recent years, he had been trying to be a better person and had even wanted to reconnect with us several times. But after the way he had treated his brother for who knows how many years, he just couldn't find the courage to do so. He was here to say he was sorry for everything, even if it was too late. Then he actually started crying, and I really didn't know what to do, but my dad came to the rescue, comforted him, and even made him a cup of tea to help him calm down a bit. Finally, when he left, I told him that everything was going to be okay, and that I was sure his brother would have appreciated his gesture. That seemed to make him feel a bit better, and I think I did the right thing. Even though it was too late for him to realize his mistakes, at least he did, which is more than I can say for others, like his parents. To be honest, I don't even think it was entirely his fault. His parents weren't there for either of their children and thought they were doing Jack a favor by treating him like the golden child. But in reality, they spoiled him too much and, in the end, did no favors for either of their children. I feel sorry for both of them. They deserved better parents and better lives. Update 4. Hi. So I spoke with my lawyer and told him what Jack had shared with me. We decided not to do anything and wait for them to make those posts so we could then use them against them in court. I also spoke with Jack, and he said he was willing to testify against his parents if necessary. So everything was sorted out a few days ago, and they finally made that post on social media. I immediately emailed them, saying that if they didn't take it down as soon as possible, we could take legal action and file a defamation lawsuit against them. I was counting on them being stubborn and not taking it down, but I guess they realized this was going to be a losing battle. It probably didn't help that I told them Jack was on our side, so they were going to lose anyway. They took the post down immediately, but still insisted they were going to take everything from me. At this point, I was starting to get bored, so I wished them good luck with that and then blocked their email address. Now they're free to do whatever they want. I really wish them luck. They're definitely going to need it. Now that the only person they could count on, Jack, is no longer on their side, they're on their own. I really want to see how they're going to handle this. Update 5. Well, my in-laws filed their lawsuit, and it wasn't pretty for them. For starters, they took things to court and didn't have any serious case, so it was clear they weren't going to win anything. But the worst part wasn't that. It was Jack's testimony, which seemed to hit them particularly hard. First, my husband made that video, and then their other son testified against them. Honestly, it was worth seeing their faces crumble at that moment. The son they had spoiled so much was now not going along with their stupid games. After that, I felt really good because, in part, I thought my husband deserved this sort of revenge against them. And this isn't over yet because I'm definitely going to countersue, since the post they made deserves some sort of punishment. A lesson to not mess with me or my husband's memory. Update 6. I have to update because we've reached the verdict of my defamation countersuit, and now my in-laws have had to pay me $1,000 in compensation. It's not much, but it's quite symbolic that they wanted to take my property and ended up losing money instead, even if it wasn't much. I don't plan to do much with that money, maybe just take my parents out for a nice dinner to thank them for everything they did for me when I was so devastated by my husband's passing. Either way, they will have all my gratitude when they're older and need care because they've truly been good parents to me all my life. My in-laws can't say the same because the only son they had has now turned his back on them, and they deserve it for being such unpleasant people. Sooner or later, they'll realize their mistakes, and it's likely to be too late for them. Since I think this will be my last update, I want to address an idea another Redditor suggested that had many upvotes. The idea of taking my husband's video to a local TV program and having it published. I understand some might think it's a good idea, but the truth is, I can't do that to my husband. He never said he wanted his video to be public beyond his parents, so it wouldn't be right for me to do it. I hope I don't have to return, and that my in-laws have finally learned their lesson once and for all.